They built shelters against a world that wanted to kill them. Walls of stone against the wind, roofs of hide, against the cold, firelight flickering on faces that refused extinction. Every line of rock was survival, every shadow, a story, and yet one day they walked away. The homes remain, imperfect, silent, untouched, as if time itself forgot to erase them. Doors still framed, hearths still marked with ash, but not a single human footprint left behind. The question hangs heavy in the still air. Why would anyone abandon perfection? These were not primitive wanderers lost in chaos. They were engineers of the Ice Age, building with purpose, symmetry, and science long before the word existed. They mastered balance between nature and shelter, between the hunger of the land and the warmth of the flame. Yet they vanished, not in panic, not in defeat, but with precision, as if following a code written in the bones of the earth. Tonight, we walk into their silence, through the ashes of fires long gone, cold, through the walls they built, and the mystery they left behind, because buried inside these abandoned homes lies the oldest secret of human survival, knowing when to leave. The world they lived in was not gentle. It was a battlefield disguised as a landscape. Every sunrise carried a question. Would they survive another night? The cold wasn't just a season, it was a predator. The earth trembled, the rivers froze, and the sky itself turned against them. And yet, they adapted. They learned to read the wind the way we read screens, mere to sense danger in the silence before a storm. These shelters were not mere homes. They were fortresses against extinction, the thin line between breath and bones. But something changed, something unseen. The buoyser signs are scattered in the soil, charred stones, carefully extinguished, storage pits emptied with precision, tools taken, but never forgotten. There was no panic, no blood, no collapse, only decision, a collective choice to walk away from safety. What could make an entire community abandon the very thing keeping them alive? A hidden threat? A resource gone silent? Or something deeper? Something written into the rhythm of nature itself? Maybe they knew the land was shifting under their feet. That survival demanded movement. That permanence was the greatest trap of all. They didn't flee from danger. They anticipated it. They didn't wait for the storm. They walked ahead of it. Their disappearance wasn't failure, it was foresight. And it forces us to ask the question we still can't answer. What did they know that we've forgotten? Across continents and centuries, the same question echoes through time. Why did they leave? From Israel's desert valleys to the cold plains of France, from the mountains of Spain to the frozen meadows of Siberia, the pattern never changes. Perfect shelters, fire pits still marked with ash, walls fitted with precision that defies chance. And yet, total silence. No signs of war. No mass graves. No destruction. Just departure. Deliberate. Planned, complete. Archaeologists dig through these ghost villages and find stories half told. A stone knife left beneath a hearth, a child's footprint sealed in clay, a line of rocks marking the edge of what once was home. Each fragment whispers the same truth. They didn't vanish into chaos, they vanished into purpose. Somewhere within these ruins lies a hidden system, a logic of movement older than civilization itself. It's as if they lived by an ancient law. Never stay where comfort makes you forget the hunt. Maybe their genius wasn't in building what lasted, but in knowing what to leave behind. Because long before we built cities, long before we measured worth by walls and property, our ancestors lived by rhythm, the heartbeat of the earth itself. They moved with it. They listened when it said go. And as we stare at these perfect, empty shelters, we begin to see the real question. Were they running from something, or running toward something greater? The answers weren't written in words, they were buried in the soil. At Ohala 2 in Israel, archaeologists found 6 oval huts, stone foundations still locked in place, fire pits filled with charcoal from 23,000 years ago. Inside, traces of woven mats, carved bone needles, and grains of wild wheat scattered like whispers of a forgotten harvest. Everything spoke of life, comfort, order, intention. And yet radiocarbon dating revealed the unthinkable. The site was occupied for only a few short seasons, then, nothing. Across Europe, the same ghostly pattern emerged. Pincevent in France, stone-lined floors, perfect hearths, tools arranged with military precision. Abandoned Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic, multi-room shelters, built with mammoth bones, fireplaces carefully aligned to the wind. Gone. Within years, no sign of invasion. No disaster, just disappearance. Over and over again. The evidence forced archaeologists to abandon the old theories of panic and destruction. This wasn't chaos. It was choreography. They saw it in the soil, fires extinguished cleanly, stone tools stacked neatly, reusable materials removed with purpose. These were not refugees. They were planners, people who knew the season's rhythm like a language. Every abandoned hearth was not the end of a story. It was a punctuation mark, the pause before the next migration. Nomadism, it turned out, wasn't primitive, it was precision engineering. The earth became their map, the stars, their compass, and their shelters, temporary masterpieces built to last just long enough. In their disappearance, we discover not mystery, but mastery. They weren't lost. They were moving, guided by a knowledge modern science is only beginning to understand. They had no maps, no blueprints, no machines, yet somehow they built with logic sharper than ours. Their world wasn't measured in walls and borders. It was measured in cycles. Step 1, the land. They read terrain like a language. Every curve of the valley, every shade of grass told them when to stay and when to move. They watched how the wind carved the dunes, how water disappeared and returned. Their homes were not built on the earth, they were built with it. Step 2, the materials. Every branch, every stone, every bone was chosen for purpose, not permanence. They used what the land offered, flexible reeds for walls, animal sinew for rope, hardened clay for floors. When they moved, they dismantled their shelters and carried the story forward, a home reborn at every stop. Step 3, the timing. Migration wasn't random, it was choreography. They followed the rains, the grazing herds, the blooming of wild grain. Each movement was timed like clockwork, guided by the stars. To them, the sky wasn't decoration, it was data. Step 4, the structure. Circular huts, aerodynamic against wind, entrances facing east for sunrise warmth, fire pits centered for equal heat, simple geometry, yet mathematical perfection. And finally, step 5, the departure. Before leaving, they erased their traces, fires extinguished, tools gathered, footprints swept away. To them, moving on wasn't loss, it was continuity. Modern archaeologists call it seasonal migration. But in truth, it was something deeper, a sustainable system that balanced freedom with structure. They didn't conquer nature, they negotiated with it. Every move, every pause, every shelter was a conversation with the planet. Where we build to dominate, they built to belong. And in that balance lies a forgotten blueprint, not for survival alone, but for harmony between human intelligence and the Earth's pulse. We call them primitive, but look closer, and the illusion shatters. They built homes that breathed with the wind. We build towers that choke on their own heat. They moved with the seasons. We fight them, then wonder why the world pushes back. Their shelters cooled themselves with airflow and orientation. Our cities burned billions to imitate what they did with reeds and clay. They lived light, carrying everything they owned, yet leaving no scars on the land. We hoard metal and glass until our planet groans beneath the weight. Their technology was invisible, woven into rhythm, instinct and observation. Ours glows in neon, but blinds us to consequence. In their world, the system was simple. Take only what you can carry. Build only what you can leave behind. In ours, we build forever, and forget that forever is a myth. Archaeologists once thought intelligence meant invention. But maybe intelligence meant adaptation. Nomads engineered for change, not for comfort. Their genius wasn't in the tools they made, but in the wisdom of knowing when not to use them. They understood that permanence is an illusion, and survival is not about resisting nature, it's about listening to it. Modern science calls it resilience. They called it life. We designed cities to last centuries. They designed lives that could endure millennia. Every shelter they built was a dialogue with time, a promise whispered into dust. We will not conquer this land. We will remember how to walk with it. Maybe the tragedy isn't that they vanished. Maybe the tragedy is that we forgot what they knew. They didn't wander aimlessly. They orchestrated movement. Every migration was a decision, deliberate, democratic, precise. There were no kings, no palaces, no armies, yet somehow thousands moved as one. How? Because their leadership wasn't built on command. It was built on consensus. Elders read the stars, hunters read the herds, mothers read the land. Each voice mattered, because survival didn't allow arrogance. Their power wasn't centralized, and it was distributed. Every member of the tribe carried a fragment of knowledge, a map in their memory, a story in their bones, a ritual in their hands. Together, they formed a living network, a system without walls, a civilization that fit in a circle of firelight. Their laws weren't written on stone tablets. They were sung into memory, passed through rhythm, myth, and motion. They knew that knowledge stored in one place dies with that place. So they made their culture portable. Every story, every skill, every tradition was designed to move. This was their secret weapon, mobility as survival. While kingdoms rose and fell behind fortress walls, the nomads carried their wisdom across centuries, untouched by collapse, unbroken by time. When drought came, they adapted. When rivers shifted, they followed. When empires turned to dust, they kept walking. They didn't fear change. They expected it. To them, life wasn't about holding ground. It was about holding connection. The tribe was the structure. The movement was the law. The land was the teacher. And through this silent strategy, they achieved something every empire fails to master. Continuity without control, no thrones, no borders, no written laws. Yet their system survived longer than any kingdom we can name. Because they understood one truth that modern civilization forgets: you don't need to rule the world to belong to it. They vanished thousands of years ago, but their shadow still walks beside us. Every time we pour concrete, every time we draw borders, every time we build something meant to last forever, we drift further from what they knew. Instinctively, they built for seasons. We build for centuries, and in that difference lies the story of our forgetting. Our cities rise like mountains, our skylines stab the clouds, and yet, somehow we feel less permanent than ever. Storms wash away coasts. Floods swallow homes. Heat turns glass towers into furnaces. Nature reminds us the world was never ours to own, but the nomads understood that long before we gave it names like climate change. To them, the earth wasn't an enemy to be conquered. It was a rhythm to be respected. They lived by movement, by balance, by restraint. And perhaps that restraint was their genius, because where we see progress and expansion, they saw wisdom in limitation. Their homes didn't fight the elements, they flowed with them. Their survival wasn't about domination, it was about listening. They vanished without a trace, but maybe that was the point. They left the land as they found it, no scars, no ruins, only stories written in wind and ash. In a world drowning in excess, their silence feels prophetic. They remind us that civilization isn't measured by what we build, but by what we remember to leave untouched. So the question isn't, why did they leave? The real question is, how did we forget? Maybe their disappearance wasn't a mystery to solve. Maybe it was a message, a whisper through time saying, do not mistake stillness for progress. The earth moves, and you must learn to move with it. Because in the end, survival was never about permanence, it was about harmony, and maybe the ones who vanished were never lost. They simply went where the wise always go, where the world still breathes free. For millions of years, humans didn't wait for safety to find them. They built it. Long before blueprints, before bricks, before walls that touched the clouds, Our ancestors looked at the empty horizon and imagined shelter where there was none. They shaped homes from wind, grass, and will. They tamed fire not with force but with understanding. They built perfection, and then they walked away, not in fear, not in failure, but in faith. Faith that the earth would still hold them, even without walls to define them. We, the children of permanence, call them nomads, but maybe they were the first architects of balance. They mastered what we forgot, that survival is not about control, it's about rhythm, connection, grace in letting go. We build monuments that crumble. They built memories that endure. Their legacy isn't written in stone, it's carried in the wind and the instinct that still whispers when we stand before a storm. They didn't vanish. They evolved into the silence between civilizations, a reminder that every wall we raise is just a pause in humanity's greater movement. So when you look at these empty shelters, ask yourself, what will we leave behind when we are gone? Will the earth remember us kindly, or sigh in relief when our noise fades? Because maybe the true genius of the ancients wasn't in how they lived, but in how little they took with them when they left. Music swells. Final aerial shot of endless plains under dawn light. And now, as you stand in their silence, I'll ask you, do you think they disappeared, or did they simply go home? Tell me in the comments, what do you think the nomads knew that we've forgotten?